Greetings, Dr. Mark Winden here from the Department of Criminal Justice, and in this video I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about Chapter 2, Understanding the Drug Problem from a Global Perspective. So with this chapter we have a really nice overview looking at the problem of drugs and crime from an international perspective. And there's really so much we could cover. I mean, there are books and books written on international aspects of drugs and crime. So when we start thinking about global illicit drug trade, we begin to think about how this is run, like an international business involving the manufacturing, the cultivation, the sales, the distribution of illegal drugs in all areas in the world. And one of the problems we face is that the drug trafficking system is dynamic. It changes. It adjusts. People who work in drug trafficking, the drug trade, work in a flexible manner where they're able to adapt to changes. And that, of course, leads to difficulties in terms of law enforcement and criminal justice responses. The one huge factor we see related to all this international drug trade is money. And when you look at how much money is tied up in the illicit drug trade, it's just really mind-boggling. And the estimate your authors provide range from 28 billion to 400 billion. That is just astronomically high figure there. Some international surveys are presented in your textbook, the World Drug Report, and that provides a wealth of information. It's published by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and also we have the European School Survey Project on Alcohol and Other Drugs, and that also provides a wealth of information about the rates of illicit drug, alcohol, and tobacco use of teenagers in 36 different European countries. And so you can see these drug reports focus on prevalence, incidence, rates of use, the types of drugs that are used, how often, the costs, and the toxicity aspects related to illicit drug use. For example, one study found that an estimated 28 million years of healthy life were lost worldwide when we look at the extent of the problem. If we look at some of the prevalence rates, you can see that in your textbook in the charts and graphics, and see how that relates to different types of drug-related use and problems. One finding looked at American and European adolescents. They found that American adolescents are less likely than European adolescents to use cigarettes and alcohol, but American adolescents were more likely to use illicit drugs. So we know the drug problem is worldwide, and we know we have major problems within the United States. And of course, later on we'll be looking at the United States and drug problems, and of course you can analyze any particular level that you want. You can look at city, neighborhoods. You could look at county, state, and so on. One of the other features that we have to address is the technology that allows those in the illicit drug trade to make synthesized psychoactive drugs. So this is a big problem as well, and it's probably only going to get more complex and and worse. Some of the other features of the new psychoactive substances, NPS, are also discussed in your textbook related to the different technologies related to manufacturing. Also, the problem of global drug trafficking is addressed, and you can read about that and the difficulties law enforcement faces due to the flexibility and movements of the drug trafficking trade, and you can see how that occurs. They give an example of tracking of heroin and talk about that, and also conduct a historical analysis about how heroin's produced, where, who uses it, the different routes of distribution, and so on. So you can read that and really see the vast extent of different countries over time that have been involved in the heroin trade. Most of the heroin in the United States probably comes from Mexico and Colombia. And your authors go ahead and they talk about the different types of heroin. And that, I think, of course, is very relevant if you're working in the field. You'll have to know a lot of the detailed differences in the types of drugs, or even for a specific drug, the different nature of how that drug is manufactured, what it consists of, how to identify it, its effects, and so, again, a vast amount of information that one needs to have. There's also a section on trafficking fentanyl, and we have seen that this is a huge problem right now, and it's been an ongoing problem for a number of years now, which accounts for opioid-related overdoses and deaths. This has been a huge problem in the United States, and one that I address in several of my courses as it relates to violent crimes and homicide rates as well. There's also discussion of trafficking of cocaine, and how you can start comparing, contrasting how these different drugs are trafficked, and the different players and the countries, and the criminal justice responses, and the consequences and effects. Also, a section on trafficking marijuana, also trafficking of meth, and also LSD and PCP and ketamines. We also see that discussed as well. The section on drug trafficking and violence, I think, is very important and relevant as well. And that not only from the international aspects, but all the way to the state, county, local, and neighborhood levels, when we start looking at different types of drug-related crimes and violence. I know when there are crimes at the local level that occur, violent crimes, a lot of times people want to know, well, was it drug-related? Was it? And there's been some that I looked into and found, for example, because people want to know that are living in an area and there's a homicide, for example, they want to know, well, what were some of the factors related? I think what they really want to know, are they or their family at risk? Are they or their family at risk for violent crimes? And so they want to know kind of the nature of what happened there, and maybe law enforcement might say, well, it was drug related. Well, what does that exactly mean? Does that mean that it was a drug deal that went bad? Was that someone ripped off someone else and they were getting revenge back? What's going on? Did someone steal someone else's drugs? So we want to know the nature of that, but we also want to begin to start looking at risk factors related to all of this. So we can look at drug trafficking and violence, and there's some case studies and examples, and then also drugs and narco-terrorism, where we start looking at anti-government political groups and that are also involved in the illicit drug trade. And there's some examples in Afghanistan and Colombia and other countries as well. So, summing up, the psychoactive drugs have been around for many years, and really we've, according to your authors, we've not designated a drug problem basically until the 20th century. And so there's been a lot of changes in the last 100 years, a lot of changes in the last 50, a lot of changes in the last year. And we'll, of course, see that as we progress in the course. Thank you.